With years of buildup and deep ties into the lore of the story, Wano was bound to be a massive and important arc for One Piece. Expectations were understandably very high, especially in regards to the main antagonist, Kaido. He ended up being a pretty controversial villain. Anecdotally, from what I've seen, his perception is pretty mixed. He's often called boring, two-dimensional, flat, whatever the adjective may be. People thought he was really underwhelming. For those who don't know, I only just caught up to One Piece relatively recently, like sometime last year, so before I made it into this arc, it actually had concluded in the manga. Some of my friends told me to keep expectations low for Kaido, and one even told me that he's like One Piece's Jiren, another powerful antagonist that gets a lot of the same criticisms. For what it's worth, I also do like Jiren. He probably deserves his own video like this. Anyways, reading the arc and watching it too at points, I didn't know what to expect with Kaido, but I ended up actually thinking he was pretty cool. Not in the sense that he just raw or whatever, but like surprisingly well written. Maybe it's because my expectations were set really low from other people, but I felt he did his job pretty well. I won't pretend he's perfectly written, because he isn't. He's not a masterpiece. But I do think he doesn't get a lot of the credit he deserves, and he's often way too underrated. That's what I want to focus on today. I think Kaido isn't a terrible villain. He's definitely not as bad as people make him out to be, even if he wasn't perfectly executed. We'll be looking at a few different aspects of him in this video and why I think he was actually handled pretty well, while also remembering the fact that he did have pretty high expectations. He's not my favorite villain, but I do want to defend him a bit here. And I'll be completely honest, this video is kind of disjointed. I don't have a full script I'm going off of. I'm just reading certain points that I wrote down about him. So if I miss anything, that's why, but more importantly, that should tell you these are just my complete unfiltered thoughts about Kaido. And basically my first impressions of him after a full read-through of the series. So consider this part essay and part review of Kaido, I guess? I don't really know. First, we'll talk about his personality. What's he like? Of course, popular opinion is that he doesn't really have a personality. Or if people think he does have a personality, it's that it's really boring. It's as simple as he likes to fight, he's a strong guy, and he's evil. Plus, he likes to drink sometimes. But I think the Wano arc does show us a lot more than what people give him credit for. We do get a look into how Kaido's mind works and what he's truly like. He's not just two-dimensionally strong and evil. There is more to him under the surface. I think a really good example of this is when Kaido's fighting the samurai. This fight shows very clearly what drives him. Kaido of course exudes strength and confidence, and he lets it be known that he values this in other people. Boldness and courage are what he looks for in other people that are fighting him. And he does give credit where credit is due. He respects those who display those same traits that he aims to have. He's often condescending with his opponents, but mainly because he doesn't think he could find anyone that could actually challenge him. And to be fair, not a lot of people really can challenge him, besides Odin. For a while, there wasn't really anyone that could stand up to him. But in those rare moments where he does find an opponent that deserves his respect, he will give that respect. He'll acknowledge their strength and how he likes that strength. He doesn't show this a lot because there's not a lot of people that can match his power, much less surpass it. This is also why when we first see him, he's seeking death. He's looking for a thrill that he can't find. He loves strength. He values that within himself and within other people, but he can't find that same strength within other people, and it makes him frustrated. He goes so long without knowing a challenge. Yes, strength is a big part of who he is, but it's not just in the sense that he's just strong and there's no nuance to it. There's reasoning behind why he expresses that trait so much and why he values it so much as well. He is described and named as a beast after all. It's a huge part of his character. He's also made it apparent that might makes right. Strength is absolute in his eyes. He grew up believing this, succeeding with it and believing it's the law of nature. He's known nothing but strength his entire life. And in his eyes, this is what ran the world. It's also a big reason why he hated the celestial dragons. He detests them because he sees them as pampered weaklings. And in his backstory, he outright says that war decides a man's true worth. This is equality and freedom to him. And this is a really important point. We're not just going to be talking about Kaido himself here and his personality. Later we will be discussing how he relates to the themes of the Wano arc as a whole and the story as a whole. So keep that in mind. We figure out what freedom means to him and what defines freedom. And this is a big theme of the Wano arc that we'll be observing later. His desire for strength was so great that he experimented on others and used artificial devil fruits just for a strong crew. He even turned Yamato into a prisoner, just like Big Mom, using his familial ties for strength. Strength defined everything to him. Pretty much everything he did was related to power in some way. He even thought nothing of destroying Wano and his people because they lacked the strength to even fight back against him. I like this part of his character too. I can get why some might not like the idea of strength being a personality trait, but here, I think it's pretty fleshed out and it's juxtaposed really well with everyone around him. He acts kind of as an unsurpassable wall, meant to be overcome for the dawn of the new world that everyone was mentioning throughout this arc. The idea of this dawn being brought about was mentioned multiple times throughout the arc, and he was acting as the main obstacle in its way. And as I mentioned before, he values strength in others. He gives respect where respect is due. And this could clearly be seen in his roof fight. He values the supernovae being monsters, sort of like him, and he commends them multiple times for it. Specifically Luffy we could see this with. He was really curious to see how far Luffy's ceiling would go, and he even did kind of doubt it a bit, feeling like he didn't believe Luffy could go that far. But during his fight with Luffy, he also did accept him at some point, blatantly saying in chapter 1037 that he finally found someone that could go toe-to-toe with him, telling Luffy it was a sign of acceptance. He was finally having fun in this fight, having found a challenge. And that is another piece of his personality that we get to see a bit. He does value fun. And I'm not just talking about the fact that he throws big parties all the time. He does like to have fun, and fights are his primary source of that. Although fights don't often give him that level of fun. It's to the point that he got angry when CP0 intervened. He was laser focused on the fight in front of him because of how fun it was. He enjoyed it so much that it's what caused him to start drinking, in order for him to have even more fun. And in regards to his strength, that's pretty much the point I'm trying to make. It is a big piece of his character, but there's more meaning behind it than people often give him credit for. A lot of times he's considered just a big meathead. Yes, being strong is definitely a huge piece of his personality, but it's not the only piece of it, and it's not just simply the fact that he's strong. In my eyes, there's more to it. Do I think there was too much focus on this part of him? Yeah. I understand why it was done, and like I've been outlining this entire video, there was a point to it. But I could definitely see why people think there's too much focus on this aspect of him. But at the same time, I feel it's not as bad as people say. And if you're liking this video so far, drop a like because it provides me good feedback and it really does help with the channel too. Kaido's character is also deeply rooted into the themes of the arc itself. Pretty much everything I just mentioned applies here. The strength aspect, the party-loving aspect, him seeking a powerful opponent, everything. For this portion of the video, I want to discuss how these aspects of Kaido are actually really important. They're not just character traits for the sake of fleshing him out. They're actually important pieces of the plot overall. I'm going to be focusing a lot on the themes of the Wano Arc itself, but relating it back to Kaido and how he connects to it. At points it might sound like I'm veering off course for a bit, but it's important to set the context first by briefly discussing the themes of the arc itself, and then showing how it connects to Kaido. As for that party-loving side of him, that really does play into this. I've seen some mixed views on this aspect of Kaido, and I kinda like him being this way. Kaido being a party animal is kind of a fun alternate side to him, but it's not a completely irrelevant fact about him either. It does play into the themes of this arc, as well as the historical context around it. I think one of the best examples of this is Oden. Obviously the two of their stories are very deeply intertwined. But one example I can think of off the top of my head, Oden said he'd be happy if people would tell a story over a drink. And that's pretty much what the entire arc is. Kaido is throwing a huge party, and Oden's story is being told throughout. A grand story fitting for a grand party. The party Kaido's throwing becomes Oden's story, they're telling it over a drink. Kaido is also obviously the oppressor of Wano, and he's the whole reason Wano is the way it is. Beyond the idea of freeing the people of Wano, freedom itself is a huge theme in this arc that manifests through multiple other characters with other objectives, and Kaido directly stands in the way of that. That might sound pretty basic. Like, of course, if everyone wants freedom, there's gotta be some sort of obstacle. Kaido is that obstacle. But he's not just a big brick wall. He's the complete antithesis to freedom. And that's because of his own views on freedom. Such as what we mentioned before when it came to his strength. Freedom is an important piece of this arc beyond just what Luffy goes through. Of course, there's Oden's story with him wanting to leave. Obviously, there's Yamato's story, which is directly tied into Kaido. He's an oppressor on a larger scale, and a smaller scale with his child. There's even smaller aspects like Marco being a free man. We get to see him living his life how he wants after what happened with Whitebeard. Not that his previous situation was bad, just that now he lives a different type of freedom. The whole idea of freedom is crucial to this arc as a whole, as well as the value of liberation. No matter the cost, liberation is essential for happiness. Luffy, of course, being the symbol of this, figuratively and literally after his awakening. Him being the embodiment of freedom and joy, juxtaposed with Kaido being the exact opposite of him. Incapable of finding joy his whole life, and because of that, oppressing everyone around him. Creating artificial devil fruits, cursing people and scarring them with a permanent smile. This is a direct representation of Kaido himself. The victims with the smile fruit smiling, looking happy on the outside but actually deeply scarred on the inside. It's a representation of the true joy that Kaido can never find himself, with his burden being the burden for everybody else around him. Now, they too express inauthentic joy. There is of course the aspect of the government trying to suppress Nika, and Luffy by extension. It's not just Kaido, there are plenty of things in the world trying to suppress joy and freedom. Oppression through strength is Kaido's MO after all. As for Luffy, liberation is his strength, and it's infectious. Another big theme of Wano deals with entrusting wills onto others, in multiple ways. A lot of it starts with the Minks and their wills. And of course, everything to do with Oden. Many characters in this arc are hearing about others' wills, and either intentionally or unintentionally carrying them out. There's plenty of examples with this. Ace's will with Luffy and with Yamato too. Nika and Luffy obviously. Even Law using Corazone's power. All of that fits into this theme in a way. Kaido wanting to entrust his will onto Yamato in order to make a new shogun. Basically forcing his will onto Yamato and trying to break Yamato's own desires. Kaido even says that slaves will bend to his will, further enforcing that idea. Not only is he the antithesis to freedom and to Luffy, but also to Oden, who Yamato of course tries to emulate. Oden fought to free Wano and venture out into the world, as did all of his followers and eventually Yamato, directly inheriting Oden's will because of this. Even after death, Oden is clashing with Kaido. Their ideals are in direct contrast, and who better to represent this than Kaido's child? By forcing Yamato to try and follow the path he laid out, in the end, Kaido's expectations of a powerful opponent were subverted through Luffy. That same joy and laughter Kaido sought to suppress was the source of his defeat. All this time he was searching for a bold warrior who could defeat him, and it ended up being this guy that fights like he's in a cartoon. When you look at Kaido in the context of the arc itself, he does have pretty deep ties into the themes of it. This video isn't meant to say you're wrong for not liking Kaido, because you could have any multitude of reasons for that. Rather, I just want to outline why I believe he's written with care and nuance. Oda portrays him in a way that shows he definitely wasn't written haphazardly, and he does have strong connection to the story around him. He's not the disjointed, flat villain that many say he is. I think a lot about him is written with purpose, and with heavy consideration of the themes of the arc and the story as a whole. There are some other aspects of him that I enjoy too, which I feel are more subjective, like the idea of him being a big wall. Even with any of the thematic nuance removed, I like that. And his design is amazing too and really reflects that. He has one of my favorite designs of all the villains, which is pretty high praise for a series with this many great designs. And I like the fact that he likes to party and drink and isn't always too serious. Instead of making him serious and angry all the time, there are some moments in the arc where he just talks like a frat boy basically, which is kind of funny to me. It actually did catch me off guard. Same with his true personality and feelings coming out when he's drunk. That tough guy persona is completely gone when he drinks. I can see why it might be off-putting for some people, especially with the scenes where he's crying, but for me, it's honestly pretty enjoyable. In my eyes, it's probably the most charming part of his character. Is Kaido a perfect villain? Not at all. He's definitely not flawless, and he's not even my personal favorite One Piece villain. In my eyes though, Kaido is a victim of his own expectations. Even though I do enjoy him to a great extent, more than most people honestly, I can definitely see why he fell short of expectations, and that definitely is part of why he's not perceived so well. I get it, people expected a lot of him, and didn't want anything short of perfection. I actually discussed something similar to this in a video about Jujutsu Kaisen with Megumi specifically. If you're a fan of that series, I'll link that above. But for Kaido, the bar was very high to begin with, and for what he is, I think he is a good villain. I did enjoy him whenever he was present, but at the same time, I do agree he fell a bit short, and I completely understand why people hold the opinions they do. Especially when you look at his backstory compared to other antagonists, yeah, I do think more could have been done with that. Not that a backstory is everything, and I do think that backstory in particular is disingenuously used by people to make him seem flatter than he is, which really does contribute to the harsh judgment of him. But overall, I do enjoy him as a villain. Even if he's not flawlessly written, there is still a ton to enjoy about him, and there definitely was a lot of care put into how he was written. In short, the summary of this video is that I think he was judged a bit too harshly. Let me know what you think below. Do you agree? Disagree? Do you hate him? Do you love him? And be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you want to see more videos like this one. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.